Hi, Siddharth. Rashika here
Hi,
from
Ankita.
Universe. Hi.
Hi.
Ankita is here as well. We'll just wait for the other
Okay.
panelists to join.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Rashika, quick question.
Yes, Siddharth?
Will somebody be introducing the panelists and me?
Yes, yes. Panchali, I think Panchali or Ankita, one of them will be from
Okay,
GCNI.
great. All right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then I can just get started with the questions.
Yes,
Once,
absolutely.
perfect. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'll be off screen, but if you need anything, you could just like quickly just holler me
No
out.
worries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good afternoon, all the attendees.
Good afternoon, Siddharth.
Hi, Panchali. Good afternoon.
We'll start when all the speakers join. Then I'll start at 4:15.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll be here.
Okay.
Hello, Dr. Thomas.
Hello.
Hi, Rashika here from Universe.
Hi.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Thomas, we can hear you and we can see you as well. Siddharth is here. We'll just wait for one more speaker to join us and we can then begin. And we have about 5 minutes for the session to begin.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. Bye, Sudha.
Hello, Susan.
Hi.
To the discussion. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
We have about a minute to begin the session, and I'll go off screen. But if you all need anything, just give me a shout out. Over to you all. Over to you, Panchali.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to both of you. This is Sid.
Afternoon. Afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Hello.
A very good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining the fireside session of the Indian Sustainability Dialogue 5.0. The topic of this discussion is leadership for sustainable businesses. Sustainable leadership is when leaders of businesses manage businesses with environment, society, and long term sustainable development goals in mind. This discussion aims to initiate a dialogue on leadership, business performance, ensuring benefits to societies and the environment. We have Mr. Siddharth Vase, founder and host of the CEO Chair talk show, and also the founder of Bearing Strategy LLP, as the moderator for the session. We have as a panelist Dr. Thomas Becker, Vice President Sustainability Mobility Strategy at BMW Group, and Ms. Susan Ferguson, UN Women Representative for India. Now I request Mr. Siddharth to take over and commence the session. Over to you, Mr. Vase.
Thank you so much, Panchali. Thank you for the warm welcome. Good afternoon, Susan. Good afternoon, Thomas. Hope you're doing well.
Kind of. Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you both. So, in recent times, the definition of sustainability has expanded from an environmental viewpoint alone towards inclusion of economic as well as social equity as well. We have today's business leaders that must manage business with environment, society, and long term sustainable development goals in mind. Susan, with your permission, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, Susan, in your opinion, in 2021, how has the definition of sustainability changed more now than it has in over the past couple of decades?
Thank you very much for the question, Siddharth, and good afternoon to you and Thomas and everyone else.
Thank you.
So I think sustainability was originally defined as being, making sure that in our lives now and our development now that we're not impacting on future generations and their ability to also be able to live a life. But I think it's really morphed from that into looking at a whole lot of intersectionalities. So, originally, I think we had quite a concrete definition based on, for example, poverty and making sure that people didn't live in poverty. But actually now we know that, poverty is really multi-pronged, isn't it? That the experience of poverty for everyone is very different. It's different if you're a man, it's different if you're a woman, it's different if you're living in different countries. So it's a much more comprehensive idea about what leads to sustainable development now, I think, and that you must act on different aspects at the same time. And this is really being codified, I think, in the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. There's 17 of these goals leading to sustainable development. And gender equality is a standalone goal, but it's also across every single goal because women experience life differently to men quite often. And without a nuanced approach to sustainability and development for all, we're just not going to get there. So I think that has really changed over the years.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more, Susan, and thank you so much for those opening remarks. Thomas, coming from a corporate perspective, coming from a leadership perspective, the last 2 years have not been easy for any of us, especially for organizations such as yours that have a global presence. So in your opinion, how has the added, I would say, responsibility of sustainability made leadership more challenging in the corporate world?
Very clearly, and I think, first of all, thank you very much also for that invitation and the opportunity to discuss. If you look back where sustainability came from in a company like ours, that was in the early 70s, and this was about sustainable production, meaning having everything in order within our own premises. So that expanded into the role of our product, meaning at the end of the day, what comes out of the tailpipe in the automotive industry, harmful substances and CO2. Today, we are talking about a completely different situation. We are talking about responsibility for an entire supply chain. So if you look at what really matters for the CO2 footprint of a company like ours, it is shifting from tailpipe to value chain. With every additional electric vehicle, we are shifting the focus of what we are responsible for away from the street into the supply chains. So that is one big game changer, which means that we need to, much deeper than in the past, integrate sustainability topics like the CO2 footprint, like energy usage, like circularity, like secondary materials into the discussions we have with our partners in the supply chain. We need to support, on the other hand, our customers of electric vehicles, for example, in having access to green energy. So we depend much more thereby on the collaboration with third parties than we ever did. And the last, I think, fundamental change is that whereas those old topics at the end of the day could be managed the same way globally, we are now, namely, if you look at the social dimension of sustainability, into the need to much more deeply look into the differences between regions. Diversity will not mean the same in China as in Denmark, as in the United States or South Africa. We really have to find a new balance between central steering mechanisms, centrally defined targets, centrally steered processes, and the right kind of adaptability to the differences in regional situations and needs. And this means a need to ever more deeply integrate the sustainability dimension into the management, both at headquarter level as well as in our plants, our facilities, and our sales organization.
Well said, Thomas, and thank you for those notes. Susan, coming back to you, you had highlighted in a recent interview that, and speaking of gender equality or inequality for that matter, that the world is suffering from a shadow pandemic of gender inequality and violence against women. You're in a very unique situation where you're representing the UN Women in India. What are some of the steps that, in your opinion, are being taken globally towards reducing or eradicating that?
Thank you very much. And thank you for raising that question in such a conversation as well, because gender-based violence is a terrible scourge, and it's something that women worldwide share, unfortunately. You know, every country has at least 30% of the female population who've experienced violence, and in some countries it's much higher than that. And we know that during the pandemic, that violence has really increased, and it's called a shadow pandemic because often you can't see it. You know, women often don't talk about it, they don't seek help about it because it's often too difficult to seek help. And especially in the lockdowns, of course, it's invisible because it's behind closed doors. So yet we know it has traveled along with the pandemic and really replicated much like a pandemic itself. So we know that in some countries it's doubled, and in India, the National Commission for Women has recorded more than a twofold rise in gender-based violence during the lockdown last year. So really maintaining and strengthening the non-face-to-face services is really huge and really incredibly important for during the pandemic, when people can't often get out of their homes to seek help. So, you know, expansion of helplines is really important. So telephone lines, also apps on phones that women can access secretly from husbands, for example. And both those things have been put in place in India, which is fantastic. Other countries have also done things like, developing sort of pop-up centres in grocery stores, for example. This is something tried in France, where women can seek help when they go to the grocery shop. So I think another thing that happened in India, which also happened in some of the other countries, was that services providing support to survivors of violence were made, essential services. So much like health services for the pandemic, violence against women services were also made essential services so that they could continue to run during the pandemic. And that has been absolutely essential. So I'm just having a look at my notes here. I don't want to miss anything. So I think that in fact that last one is one of the most important things, so that governments have been able to continue to provide support, and so that CSOs likewise have been able to continue to provide support. So thank you for the question, Siddharth.
Of course, Susan, and thank you, to you and your teams for doing all the good work that has happened over the past couple of years and is continuing to happen as well. These are important conversations that need to keep getting brought out in as many forums as we possibly can. We have quite a few people that are watching as well, and I'd encourage all of them, if they have a question or a comment, to put it in the comment section, to either for Thomas or for Susan as well. Thomas, coming back to you, you talked about the individual responsibility, the corporate responsibility, and the government responsibility as well. From a perspective of BMW, could you share a few of the elements that go into creating a sustainable business strategy?
Well, strategy always means to to create the interface between the changes that are happening outside of the organization and the dynamism that has to happen inside the organization. So this is our central role. And that means that we have to identify objectives, not only to just follow regulation which is out there today, but to really look into the future. So to give you one example, today, the world over, the discussion is about how to go from the internal combustion engine to the electric drivetrain at very different speeds. One of the core aspects is how will infrastructure develop? How will customer incentives be defined? And here we are facing the challenge that the old days where this was decided, let's say, by the European Commission, the government of India, the government of the United States is disintegrating. It is the choice of city councils where to put public charging infrastructure if you need a charger where people actually live. So the political environment becomes much more complex and the influencing factors the same. In Europe, we have a huge divide between markets like the Netherlands, where charging is actually not an issue anymore, and places like Bulgaria, where I would not go for an electric vehicle, given the situation as it is. So that is one aspect. The other one is what will be next? I'm pretty sure that in 10 years from now, people will not ask the question, do I like 0 gram of CO2 tailpipe of a BMW more than I like, for example, 0 gram coming out of a Tesla? They will question the energy efficiency of the product. How much electricity do I need to travel a mile? They will ask, what is the footprint of the product? Yeah. What is the overarching impact on climate that I have along the entire chain? They may ask, and rightly so, about have you the right measures in place to make sure that human rights standards are adhered to the extent possible, and is it that made sure to the extent possible by your management of the supply chain? So we will see a broadening of what sustainability actually means beyond just today's debates. And one of the, let's say, fascinating parts of my job is to try to look indeed into the future and prepare the right choices today.
Absolutely. No, and we thank you for the work that you're doing as well, Thomas, because looking into the future is not easy. And especially if, again, bringing up the last 2 years has taught us anything, that none of us can prepare actually for what is going to happen, just the way that we react and respond.
Right.
Susan, coming back to you, Thomas talked about organizations working together, global organizations such as yours working with corporate organizations. Coming down to a more individual level, what can people do individually or in small groups or teams if they want to join the global sustainability, the initiative and the efforts?
Well, I think that that's such an interesting question because, of course, it's often the people who drive demand for these changes. I mean, coming back actually to your first question, Siddharth, about how has sustainability changed? I mean, I think 30, 40 years ago, I don't think people even knew about climate change, and so now it's just such a normal and terrible part of our lives that we are constantly worried about it. And, a big part of that change has been individual scientists, so people with skills and knowledge, actually, questioning the world and finding out what's going on and providing advice on what we can do to change situations. So that is one individual thing, using our skills and abilities in this striving for a sustainable world. But also, this area of the demand for change, and here I think young people are often at the forefront of this nowadays. They're the ones who a sustainable world is going to really be essential for. And you can see that they are in the forefront of arguing for changes, both at the policy level and also at an individual level, being careful about our waste and our use of electricity and, driving the demand also for electrical vehicles, So I think that this, as an individual, it's so important for us to know about the issue and inform ourselves and be able to take action where we can to make the world a better place. And we have, such great role models out there in the world who are making a difference. And that includes individuals in governments, in business. And I think business has such a key role to play. And Thomas, I think you've really outlined that and showing already that, your company is on the forefront of this. So, and that's driven by individuals within organizations that make that change. And often those individuals are also leaders. So I think they're some of the things I think that individuals can do.
Absolutely, Susan. And you brought up a great point that some of the customers today, the clients today, the individuals today are more well connected than they've ever been. They're more aware of the environment that they live in. They're much more vocal, I would say, about the things that they want to see in the products and the services and the companies that they go to or where they buy their goods from. So coming to Thomas, according to a recent study, which was not too far ago in 2019, 73% of global consumers are willing to change their consumption habits to lessen the negative impact on the environment. Are you seeing a lot of these change behaviors or conversations with your customers who are coming to you and have been coming to you for the past couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. So namely, many of our corporate customers are leading the dynamism of that.
Mm-hmm.
So my colleagues from corporate sales tell me that 3 years ago, they had to deal with purchasing guys and HR people when it was about putting together the right corporate fleet. And we are talking about 3-digit numbers here. So that's an important part of our business. Today, they meet my colleagues who want to know a lot about what they're actually purchasing and who want to know more than just the figures that you can see on the internet anyway. So as many corporates are having their own climate and sustainability agendas, which include, for example, employee mobility. This is an important driver of change in consumer behavior because this gets new technologies relatively fast into the markets and you get people into the car faster than with the turnover of the private vehicle market, which is much slower. On the other hand, if you look at the private customer, again, we are having a very divergent situation the world over. You have places where people will say, well, sustainability is about my personal well-being. It is about how material of seats is smelling or not smelling. How does it feel? Is the air clean in the car? if you ask them about the relevance of climate, they will say, oh, it's the government's job to take care of that. In other places, you have a completely different situation where people are much more motivated by saying, okay, I want to contribute to a positive future of the planet with the choice that I make. So also here, it's about to have the right approach to differences in local conditions. But at the end of the day, we are having, if you like, a bandwidth. And both bookends are wrong. One is to say, okay, it's like with organic tomatoes. I put the word organic on it and people will pay twice as much. The other bookend is, it's just a hygiene factor. Some people in government should take care of it. I don't care. The reality is in very different shades in between those bookends. And we need to cater the best way we can to these differences in attitudes and make sure that sustainability is part of what people perceive as relevant for saying this is worth spending a lot of money for. I mean, we are making one of the most expensive products people buy in their lives, and they won't just buy it because of sustainability or despite sustainability. It is a mix. Sustainability is part of brand perception, part of the matter of trust into the company, of the confidence into the product, and it blends into very many other aspects which people consider. And dealing with that complexity is quite a challenge for an organization like ours.
I'm sure it is, Thomas, and it's probably as important as ever for teams such as yours, which have come to the forefront of the organization and are actually contributing towards customer sentiment and what is the perception of the brand that is in the marketplace, like you just mentioned. You mentioned about diversity of customers as well, and going from diversity of customers, Susan, I don't think any conversation, whether it's sustainability or otherwise, is complete without talking about representation of women in leadership. And that is a huge part of sustainability as well, because if any organization, whether it is government or otherwise, wants to maximize its profits and wants to do both focus on profits and its people as well as its purpose, the women have to rise as well.
Yes.
What are your thoughts, being a senior woman leader yourself? What are your thoughts on this topic related to sustainability as well?
Well, I thank you for raising that. I think it's really critical. And actually, I often find myself saying to colleagues or others that, women, yes, there are many women who are vulnerable and more vulnerable than men in the same category, for example. But actually, women are a force for change. We are 50% of the population and an economic force for change as well. And so I think that's also what Thomas was alluding to before about, you have to be open and aware of the difference in your customer base to be able to produce something that meets their needs. And of course, unless we have women in leadership, it's often hard to recognize the diversity within the customer base. And again, I'm talking in a sort of a private sector context, but this is true, of course, within government and any decision-making bodies, including the UN. It's really important to have women's equal representation so they can raise their voice to add in solutions, ideas, innovations to the general discourse. And we know that actually companies that do well are often companies that also do well on the diversity sort of scale. And that's true for countries that do well economically. It's correlated with more equality between women and men. So it's absolutely essential that women are a part of the decision-making table and seen as a positive force for growth and community development.
Well said, Susan, absolutely. What I'll do, Susan, is I'll have Thomas have some of the closing remarks, and then I'll come back to you for yours, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thomas, you talked about looking into your little crystal ball and gazing into the future as part of the work that you do. So I'd love for you to, possibly paint a little bit of a picture of what the future would look like for BMW, for the initiatives that you're running as part of the sustainability initiatives, and then any closing remarks that you might have on the topic as well, please.
Well, I think one factor that will really impact us in the future is really maximizing the benefits of digitalization for sustainability. The supply chain issues that I just mentioned can only be tackled if the CO2 footprint of a part that is part of another part, that is part of a component, that is part of a vehicle, is monitored and communicated in a digital manner and not by hand. It has to become as much integrated into our systems as is quality data or price data. And this is what we are pushing forward at the moment. So I think we will in the future see much more digitally connected, much more transparent value chains, where also to stakeholders, to customers, much more can be known about what we actually do than ever in the past. That means, on the other hand, for a company, more accountability, more transparency, more the need to demonstrate a really good governance of those topics. So beyond the technical issue, I think the organizational approach to things, the way you support it technically in your processes will be key in order to really have this connection between the diversities of markets, of customers, of framework conditions, decision making, and accountability. So beyond all the talk about new materials, which is hugely important, lower CO2, more circularity, more electric vehicles, I think this is an overarching factor which will really change a lot here.
Absolutely, Thomas. And Susan, Thomas mentioned about, he talked about good governance, he talked about transparency, as well as accountability in corporate organizations moving forward. Do you see a lot of that similarity in your organization and the others that you work with as well?
Sure. I think that they're all recipes for success. You know, you can make various statements, but unless there's accountability on the implementation of those statements, then, you know, you have to sort of judge whether they're worthwhile or not. So, of course, that's very true. And I agree also with the digital side of things and you know, artificial intelligence and a whole range of different things are opening up as, you know, potential to drive our growth and development. But they also, of course, come with risks. So here again, it's really important to have the people, men and women, involved in some of the discussions about use of these kinds of digital methodologies and tools. So, yeah.
Great. Anything else you'd like to add, Susan? I think we're pretty much done. I don't have any further questions either from myself or from the audience. So I'd like to thank both of you for your time. I think it's been a very engrossing and engaging conversation, and I wish you both the best, to you as well as your organizations and your families as well. All the best and take care.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the chance. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and looking forward to interacting with you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending the fireside chat session. Now we will have the next session, which will start at 4:15 p.m. The validity address. I'll request everyone to join the session and stay tuned for the upcoming takeaways and vote of thanks too. Thank you everyone for attending the session. Thank you.